We continue now at the top of Daf Nun Beis Amid Beis in Meseches Bava Kamma. This is Bava Kamma Daf 52b. The Gemara is in the middle of bringing a proof from our Mishnah to the question asked on the previous Amid, which the Gemara is about to repeat. So the Gemara says, V'lo karoi l'gmalim. Isn't the case of the Mishnah exactly the case that we're discussing? It's a situation where the person covered it up properly for shvarim, for oxen, but not properly for camels. And what exactly is the scenario? Now, if it's frequent that camels come and they're going to ruin the cover, on my putter, why would the person be putter just because he covered it properly for oxen? It was not a good cover for gemalim, and he knows the gemalim are present. Posheyahu, that would be negligence. And if there are no camels around this area, pshita onasu, it's obvious that he's putter because it's an onas. So elalav, rather is it not? Isn't our Mishnah exactly the case that we asked? The asian leprakim, that what's happening over here is camels come sometimes. Ve'asu gemalim ve'arua, and then the camels actually did come, and they weakened the cover, even though he had covered it properly. V'yasu shvarim v'naflu, and now the oxen came and fell into it. V'katani pater, and it says in the Mishnah pater, that should be the answer to our very question. And so the Gemara says, Alma, we see the answer to our question. Kevan dahash deleka, since right now there are no camels. Onasu, it is considered an onus, and that's why he's pater. Don't we see this answer from our Mishnah? And the Gemara says, Amri, they say, no, liolam karoi l'shvarim v'karoi l'gmalim. Really, the case of the Mishnah is where he covered it properly in his putter, he covered it properly for both oxen and for camels. And your original question was, heichi nafel, how then did the shore fall into the bore if it was covered properly? Amar Rav Yitzchak bar bar Chana says, sheisliya mitochu. The case is again from the inside, the worms got into the cover, they weakened it, and that's what happened. But nevertheless, since he covered it properly, he is pater. And the Gemara continues, Tashma, coming here, another proof from the Mishnah. It said in the Mishnah, Lochi so karoi, if he didn't cover it properly, v'nafal asocho shora chamor, and again, an ox or donkey falls in there, v'ames and dies, chayiv, he's chayiv, because he didn't cover it properly. And so what's the case over here? Hechidami, what exactly is the case? Ile malo karoi l'shvarim v'lo karoi l'gmalim, if it wasn't covered properly for oxen or for camels. So pshita, it's obvious he's responsible. Tzricha l'mer the chayiv, do we even need to say that he's chayiv? Elalav karoi l'shvarim v'lo karoi l'gmalim, rather it must be. It's exactly our case. He covered it properly for oxen, but not properly for camels. But hechidami, but what exactly is the case? If it's frequent that there are camels here, poshehu, wouldn't that be negligence? And if it's not frequent that there are camels here, onasu, that would be an onus. Of course, he's pater. Elalav, rather is it not? The asian leprakim, that they come sometimes. V'yasu gemalim v'aru, and the camels came and they weakened it. V'yasu shvarim v'naflu, and the oxen came and they fell inside. V'katani chayiv, and it says in the Mishnah is chayiv. Alma, so we see from this part of the Mishnah, kevan the asian leprakim, since they come sometimes, poshehu, it's considered to be negligence. It should have occurred to him that this might happen, and again, this would be an answer to our question. And the Gemara says, no, liolam karoi l'shvarim v'lo karoi l'gmalim. Really what happened was, at the end of the Mishnah, he covered it properly for oxen, and it was not covered properly for camels, ushchichi gemalim, and there are many camels around, so really, he did not cover it properly. And you asked, it's negligence, it seems so obvious. Well, I did the nasiv reisha kiso karoi, since the beginning of the Mishnah talks about a case where he covered it properly, nasiv seifanami lo chiso karoi. So we have the end of the Mishnah talks about a case where he doesn't cover it properly, but enochinami, it actually is obvious. And the Gemara continues, Ika di'amri, that those that say, they have a version as follows. Hanami vaday lo iboilan. It's actually not a question to us at all. The original case of our question, where you have a case where the camels sometimes come, that's actually not a question. The kevan da'asin leprakim posheyahu, because if they come sometimes, that's negligence. The iboile asuke adaite, because it should have occurred to him that they might come. Ki boilon, what was the question that we really had? Hachihu di boilon, the question was as follows. Kiseyu kisoy sheyachal amr b'fnei shvarim ve'enu yachal amr b'fnei gemalim. Let's say a person put on a cover that's enough for the oxen, but not enough for the camels. Ushechichi gemalim, and there are a lot of camels around, so really what he did really was negligence. However, v'hisliya mitocha, but then it didn't end up weakening because of the camels, it ended up weakening because of the worms that got inside. So what would be the halach in that case? Mi amrinan, do we say, migo dava poshe etzel gemalim hava poshe anami linyan hasla, that once he's already considered negligent in terms of camels, he's considered negligent all around in terms of the worms as well. Odil malo amrinan migo, or maybe we don't say that migo, and therefore he's not responsible. And the Gemara says to this version of the question, Tashma, coming here a proof from the Mishnah, Kiso karoi v'nafal asocho shora chamor v'meis pater. Again, the Mishnah said, if he covers it properly and the ox or donkey fell in and dies, he's potter. V'yitmar alon, what do we learn on that? Amar Rabbi Yitzchak bar bar Chana she'sli mitocho. That Rabbi Yitzchak bar bar Chana said the case is, how is it that the animal fell in? Because the worms, they weaken the cover. And so hechidami, well, what exactly is the case? If the case is he did everything right, he covered it properly for oxen and properly for camels, and then from the inside it got weakened. So pshita the potter, of course he's potter. What more should he have done? Elalav, rather, is not exactly our question. It was covered properly for oxen, but not properly for camels. There were a lot of camels around. But then it was the worms that ended up weakening it from the inside. Vikatani potter, and it says potter. You see that we don't say migo. We don't say that just because he was negligent as far as the camels, he's considered negligent as far as the worms. And the Gemara says, lo, no, that's not necessarily the case over here. Liolam karoi legmalim v'karoi l'shvarim. Really, the case might be he covered it properly, totally, for camels and for oxen. V'isliya mitocho, and then it got worms from the inside. And you had a question, if it got worms from the inside, what more could he have done? It's not true. There was something he might have done. What might you have said? He had to go over there, and he has to knock upon it. He has to always make sure that the cover is strong. Kamash Malon, the Mishnah is teaching that he doesn't have to go to that extent. And the Gemara continues, Tashma, coming here, another proof to this question from our Mishnah. The Mishnah said, if he didn't cover it properly and the ox or the donkey fell in and died, then he's chayiv. So hechidami, what's the case in this part of the Mishnah? If it wasn't a good cover for oxen or for camels, do we even need to say that he's chayiv? Of course. Do we even need to say that he's chayiv? Of course he is. Rather, it has to be he covered it properly for oxen, but not properly for camels. And if it's frequent that there are camels there, posheo, again we say it's negligence. And if it's not frequent that there are camels there, so anasu, so that's an onus. He certainly wouldn't be responsible. Rather, it must be the case is camels are frequent, and really there wasn't an element of negligence. However, but it's exactly our case. The worms got inside. It ended up that it didn't become weak from the camels. It became weak from the inside. And it says in the Mishnah that he's chayiv in this case. Alma, so we see from this part of the Mishnah, that since he's considered negligent as far as camels, he's also considered negligent as far as the worms. And the Gemara says, Amri, they answered, they said as follows, Lo, no, Liolam karoi l'shvarim v'lo karoi l'gmalim, u'shchichi gemalim. Really the case is, again, he did it well for oxen, but he did not do it well for camels. There's frequent camels over there, and therefore he was negligent. V'asu gemalim v'aru, and the camels actually came, and they weakened it. V'asu shvarim v'naflu bei, and then the oxen came, and they fell inside. U'dukakashalach pshita posheahu, and that which you're asking, well, it's so obvious, that's negligence, of course he's responsible. Aidi denasiv reisha kisah karoi, since again in the beginning of the Mishnah they had a case where he covered it properly. Nasiv seifa nami lo chisa. So at the end of the Mishnah they have a case in contrast where he did not cover it properly. And the Gemara continues, Tashma, coming here a proof from the following Braisa, Nafal Esocho Shor Cheresh Shota V'Katan Suma Mahalech Balai L'Chayev. If the shore that falls inside is a Cheresh Shota V'Katan, is deaf, is a Shota an imbecile, is a Katan is a minor, or the animal is blind, or the animal is walking at night, all cases where we can't expect that the animal would see the pit. So Chayev, then the person who made the pit is Chayev. Pikeach U'Mahalech B'Yom, but let's say the shore was intelligent and walking during the day, so Pater, then the person is Pater. And so the Gemara asks, Vamai, why should that be true? Name him to have a posheil in cheresh. We should say, since what he did, he made this pit and he's negligent with regard to the animal that's a cheresh, have an ami posheil in pekeach. We should say as a posheil also, he's also considered negligent even with regards to an intelligent animal. Elalav shmamina, rather is it not, don't we see from here, lo amrin and migo, we don't apply that rule of migo, and ultimately if the animal fell in and it was an intelligent animal, we say that the person is pater shmamina, and the Gemara says indeed, we see that is the case. And the Gemara continues that the two dots, nafal lefanav v'chulu, the case of the Mishnah was again, the animal falls forward and it's from the sound of the person digging inside of the pit. And the Gemara says, Amar Rav says, lefanav mamish. When it says in the Mishnah lefanav, it means the animal actually falls forward. And liacharav, when it says it's backwards, acharav mamish, it means that the animal actually falls backward. And Rashi explains, lefanav mamish al panav, meaning the animal falls on its face. Nafal umeis mina, heavily falls on its face and dies from the hevel, from the bad air. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Nun Gimel Amud Aleph.